Hey everyone, this is Josh from Battle Geek Plus. I am with Derek Neal, and we are going to be talking about Extinction today. It's a wonderful action-adventure game with a fantasy setting, lots of monsters to take down. We're going to have some questions going on here. So first off, I know that you guys had a lot of experience with fighting games, Killer Instinct, and whatnot. What inspired you to go from fighting to more of an action-adventure setting?
Right, so one of the big things that I think is really interesting about video games in general is that there's a lot of sort of the way things have always been done that gets ported up into games. So in most games you don't actually get to fight against giant monsters, right? Instead it's some sort of abstraction of that. So for example, they have an HP meter. You kind of hack at their toe and their HP reaches 0 and then they fall over and die, right? Or it's a quick time event. And yeah, it looks cool, but you're just like pressing one button every now and then. It's not dynamic combat. So really what we wanted to do was prove that you could have dynamic skill-based combat like there is in a fighting game, but on these massive scales against opponents that are 30 times larger than you are.
Okay, that sounds good. So what are you bringing over specifically from that experience, other than the dynamic, like what kind of like combos and whatnot? What things are you bringing over from fighting games, and what sort of difficulties have you faced so far in bringing that over into more of a action setting?
Right, so for those who are really into fighting games, they'll know that a lot of games like Street Fighter and Guilty Gear use a cancel system in order to allow you to piece moves together in order to do combos. And we've actually got the same kind of system that's been developed for Avil for doing his combat. So he has a number and variety of different attacks, including AoEs, launchers, ground slams, an overhead slam, rune strikes, dodges, a whole bunch of different things like that. And he can cancel them in various ways together to create unique strings kind of on the fly. And so that whole system was actually developed by fighting game designers that had previously worked on games like Killer Instinct for Iron Galaxy, who's the developer of the game.
All right, awesome. So moving on, what inspired the look and setting of the game and the characters?
So the world is actually based on the real-life territory of Yemen. So if you take a look around at the kind of mountainous regions of Yemen, that's where it came from. And part of the reason for that is because the ogres themselves are so big, they're 150 feet tall. We needed something that would be a good bounding for the levels, you know, something that could get in their way. And so this kind of mountainous regions and these mountainous terrains provided a really good natural barrier for that. The other thing that we were really inspired by was the idea, okay, we have these large ogres, obviously it's going to be this kind of medieval fantasy theme, and so we wanted to take a lot of those out. So we took a lot of inspiration from medieval building designs, medieval worlds, things like that, and built a lot of that into the game as well.
All right, very awesome. Now, speaking of the ogres, that's a big part of the trailer. You see, you know, the limbs being sliced off and whatnot, and then, you know, it regenerates and everything, and that's something that you really... It's very unique. It's something that you haven't really seen anywhere else. What inspired that mechanic?
So the limb regeneration specifically, is that what you mean? So actually it was a gameplay need. So originally when we were first making the game, it did not have any kind of limb regeneration. And the problem that we wound up with is we wanted players to have to make tough choices when playing this game. The game is all about saving refugees, saving civilians that are in these cities, trying to get them evacuated, trying to get them to safety. And we wanted players to have to make decisions like, if I go to save this group of refugees, then what's going to happen to the group of people that are here with me now? You know, that sort of thing. The problem was that when the ogres didn't regenerate, you could just cut off their legs and then move on to the next ogre, and eventually the battlefield became littered with a whole bunch of immobile ogres that couldn't walk around anymore. So the limb regeneration solved that problem nicely and made it so that you might buy yourself a little bit of time in order to take them down or make it easier to get up on them or something, but just dismembering them is not in and of itself enough to render them no longer a threat.
All right, so you're talking about upping the difficulty a little bit, making it a bit more of a challenge. What sort of difficulty are we looking at for this game? Is this something that's a bit more casual with maybe optional higher difficulties, or are we looking at, you know, Ninja Gaiden, Dark Souls, that sort of difficulty?
So I don't expect the final product to be as difficult as a Dark Souls or something like that, but the skill cap is very, very high. And one of the things that you'll notice when you see people playing the game is that if you see someone who's good at the game, they almost make it look easy. But if you see someone who's not so good at the game, they'll still be able to do a lot of cool things, but they won't be able to chain together his attacks, his movement options, traversal, use the environment, or deal with the hectic stuff that's going on, like trying to evade a giant ogre's foot while a minion's clawing at your foot while trying to save a group of people, while trying to lure him away from the city. And definitely as the campaign progresses, it's going to get harder and harder and harder. And as you get better and better at controlling all of those different aspects of the game and kind of juggling all of these competing objectives, as you get better and better at that, the difficulty of the game is going to increase to match. And by the end of it, you'll be doing some very impressive things in what, if you just jumped into them initially, would have been very challenging scenarios.
All right, and then moving back into, we were talking about the environment and settings and stuff like that earlier. We looked at, the trailer, you're seeing all the parkour going on. We saw, during our presentation today, we saw the grappling mechanics, all the climbing, moving around and whatnot. The movement through the city, like, is that going to be pretty much standard for all the levels? Is that sort of ease of movement going to be something that is easily attainable? Is there going to be like any real limits to that?
So there are not a lot of limits to that, and in fact that's one of the things that's interesting about the game is where it's not necessary to artificially limit you, we've tried not to. So the wall running, the horizontal, vertical wall running, all of the using your whip to pull yourself around stuff, clinging to walls, air dashing, all of that stuff, pulling yourself up ledges, all of that works on everything. It works on all the buildings, it works on all the objects in the environment, it works on the ogres themselves, all of the enemies. You can run straight up parts of their armor or along their leg or right up onto their back. You can cling onto them, grab onto something with your whip and pull yourself around. And also everything in the environment is completely destructible. So if you see it, pretty much, the ogres can destroy it. Or even in some cases a veal can destroy it, depending on what it is. And the reason that we did that is we really wanted this to be kind of, we wanted every experience with the ogres to be different, every fight to be kind of dynamic. So based on what equipment they have, based on what abilities they have, and also based on how they interact with the environment, the way a level unfolds is often very different one time to the next, right? If, for example, if they've destroyed this big watchtower, then you can't use that watchtower as a launching board to get yourself up high enough to be able to ultimately decapitate them. You have to find a different means to go up there. Maybe like in the trailer, you use your whip to pull yourself around to a group of flying minions and kind of go whipping from flying minion to flying minion in order to ascend. Or maybe you use, you lure him over to the side of a cliff and you use the mountainside to your advantage. Things like that. If the next time you play you decide to save a different group of civilians first, then he'll have destroyed that watchtower or moved to a different location, and that whole strategy is not going to work anymore and you'll have to find something else.
So then, when you go back and replay a level, if you choose to put a different priority on something, it could completely change how that level plays out.
Absolutely, yes. And in fact, many of the levels, when you go back and play them over and over, will be very different experiences every time you play through them.
Fantastic. Now, you said to me earlier before we started filming that pretty much everything that takes place in the trailer is something you can do in the game. There is nothing that is just trailer-only cinematic stuff.
Yeah, so the trailer is extremely true to the game. I mean, it's a little bit embellished, obviously. It's a trailer. It's meant to make the game look good, and I think it does a great job of doing that. But you really do parkour around the city. You really do climb on anything you want, including the ogre. You really do destroy their armor, dismember them in real time. You really are fighting against them like that. And I think it's very, very representative of what the actual gameplay is, as you saw when you were, going through the demo.
Right, and that's something that I really don't see a lot with like cinematic game trailers. Is you see more cinema, less game, and I thought that was a very nice. Even though it was cinematic, it was giving you an idea of the exact things that you could do within the game, and it really, really impressed me. Now, Extinction. When should we plan on seeing Extinction out on store shelves and whatnot?
So it's coming out early next year, so Q1 2018. It's coming out for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. And people can learn more at extinction.com or by following us on @ExtinctionMG on Twitter.
All right, thank you, Derek. My name's Josh. This is Battle Geek Plus. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.